Good afternoon and welcome to our second Whitelands Conversations. Today we are very pleased and honoured to have Dr. Leroy Logan with us. Dr. Logan has had an illustrious career in the Metropolitan Police Service, of course the largest police service in the country. Today we're going to allow him to tell us about his experience, some of the challenges, and members of our team will have the opportunity to, put questions to Leroy. So, Dr. Logan, thank you for coming to participate in our second Whitelands Conversations. These conversations are intended to be user-friendly chats. There's no agenda. We just want to hear from you, your experience, your journey, and of course, what lessons we can learn from your experience. So, Dr. Leroy, welcome. I wonder if we can start by just asking you to introduce yourself, and then we'll fire a few questions. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, David. It's been a real pleasure. As usual, over the years, I've known you, so it's been extra special being invited to speak. And it's really important to have these conversations, as you said. Yeah, Leroy Logan. I'm a local guy. I was born in Islington, and all my schooling, most of it was in Islington, barring a few years in primary school stage in Jamaica, in Spanish Town in Jamaica. So I was really pleased to have that cultural immersion. But in between, other than that small section in my life, most of my schooling was in Islington. Went to Highbury Grove School, and so if there's any Gooners in the house, I'm a long-suffering Gooner. I apologise for that now. But I also went to Hackney College, where I did my A-levels, and I went to UEL to finish to do my degree in science. So I was a scientist for my first few years after my degree. And as a result of that, I thought that was my life. Set out to do science research, possibly going to medicine, or even the corporate pharmaceutical industry. But the calling of policing hit me in such a dramatic way. And I eventually joined in 1983. And the rest is history. As you said, I did a few things while I was in the Met, and one of the first things I did was being very clear when I joined, I'm a black man who happens to be a cop. So that means I integrate with my beliefs and values and principles, and I don't assimilate into the norms and values of the culture, which is really important. If you see things that need to be challenged, you don't have those misplaced loyalties or dilemmas. And one of the other things that made it easy for me was my faith. It gave me that anchor, that resilience to be very clear on my standing and not to condone any bad behavior, whether it's the public or police. Even though I was getting it from a rock and a hard place from the community, in the black community in particular, were very anti me joining. And I was getting a hard time from my colleagues who thought I was a bit suspicious, joining, having had a profession as a scientist. Are you some sort of undercover journalist? Are you writing a book? Well, I suppose they're right, because in the end, 30 odd years later, I wrote a book. You can see it featuring just behind me there. So in all honesty, I made my presence known, and my reputation preceded me, leading up to the launch of the Black Police Association in '94 and giving evidence at the Macpherson inquiry in 1998 with two other BPA members. And that led on to being involved in the Damelo, the Taylor investigation, etc. So I've had an eventful time, and I must admit, it's that sense of service has not left me. I still have a sense of service in terms of my advocacy and activism in retirement. So I still run a charity I helped set up 20 odd years ago called Voyage Youth, and knowing education is the key for young people to know their rights and responsibilities. And in all honesty, they've gone from strength to strength. I've recently stood down as chair only last year, but I'm still a patron. So I've been part of the Voyage family for the best part of 20 years with different names, but that's the current name. And that means I'm still concerned about the issues with young people. And I think it's important, especially in this time of COVID, that we really understand impacts of isolation and mental health because of lockdown, etc. So that's what's really sort of making sure, you know, I'm active and I keep my hands dirty, as they say. But it's really a pleasure to be here. Hopefully that synopsis is giving you an idea of who I am and what I'm doing.
That's a very, very modest introduction. Now, you were the main face of the Olympics security for the Met, and you also were one of the founders of the BPA in 1994. Could you tell us, why was it necessary for you to form the BPA?
Well, it came about initiative by an assistant commissioner, Wyn Jones, because he was concerned about the high resignation rates of Black officers, especially in the first 2 years. At the time, we were 4 to 5 times more likely to leave the organization in our first 2 years. So that was a really big issue. And we had these seminars in Bristol Polytechnic, as it was called then, and looking at the whole resignation rates and why was that? And I was one of the officers who went. There was about 200 Black officers in the Met at that time. And we literally opened up our veins of emotion and said, this is the reason. And the subsequent report, which I helped to formulate with other colleagues, literally just decorate people's shelves. They were never implemented. But we were drawn together in solidarity around the issues that we raised. And we saw that the report as a template to have social networks, and that really took off. And then we realized over a few years, from those 1990 seminars to 1994, that we should formalize ourselves, and that's what we did. And September 94, we launched, and our overarching aim, and it's still the overarching aim, is to improve the working environment of Black personnel, because it includes police officers and police staff, with the intention of serving the needs of the Black community, because we knew trust and confidence was a big issue. We knew, because of the type of policing they experienced for many years prior to my joining the Met, the sus law days, I myself was stopped, so I knew what it was like. And of course, the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, there's still disproportionality. So we knew there was some service delivery issues that we had to deal with. And of course, we had to step up and speak at the McPherson inquiry, underpinning our written submission to say that the police service was institutionally racist. And I think it reflected in the report. And quite recently, Lord McPherson has passed away, or Sir William McPherson has passed away, and his legacy lives on. And you know, we thank him for giving us the opportunity to influence not only the report, but the recommendations, and owning those recommendations for a number of years.
I mean, those are very exciting times, 1999, because I remember that's really the time that I met you, because I gave evidence with Joel Edwards and some other church leaders. And, you know, we were very, very concerned then that the church seemed to be silent on this big racial justice issue. Now, we've got our vice president and also our president, Libby and Dante. Dante is just joining us from Texas, sunny Texas, well, maybe not so sunny. Dante has got a question about policing, and if we can have Libby's question, that would be good. So Dante, if you can unmute yourself, please.
Hello.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask and compare, ask our speaker, how you would compare and contrast the policing in the US versus the UK with the Black Lives Matter movement and a lot of social changes. I wanted to get your opinions on that.
Okay, thanks for that, Dante. I must admit, having been involved in the Black Police Association, and we were heavily influenced by the National Black Police Association in the US. So we had a real immersion of what were the issues. And surprise, surprise, the issues of Black officers was exactly the same as the UK officers. There was the institutional racism. We saw that officers, Black officers, were disproportionately subject to discipline than their white counterparts. At least 2 to 3 times more likely to be subject to an investigation compared to a white counterpart. So there was this real big issue that we saw commonalities, and of course the same external service delivery issues around heavy-handed policing. But the really big difference was a lot of the disproportionality in the US involved shootings, and we still see that today. There is a significantly higher incident of racial profile shootings where white officers are shooting Black people, in particular Black men, and that there's a whole plethora of cases. And of course, we in the UK do not patrol with sidearms. So the incidences of firearms being an issue is much less. Not to say that in the UK, they're totally squeaky clean, as it were, because we do have death in police contacts over here because of the certain issues with, again, mental health, dealing with Black men with mental health, similar to the US. But we also have seen how overzealous stops have ended up with people losing their lives. And Rashan Charles in Hackney, only 2017, showed a very similar unauthorized chokehold leading to that young man's death. And it was an avoidable death at that. So there's certain themes that we've seen. The shooting of Mark Duggan in 2011 was almost a carbon copy of cases that they had in the US. So we saw parallels. But bringing up to the current time with Black Lives Matter, and obviously the death of George Floyd was devastating. As an officer, it really impacted me because I swore an oath very similar to that officer that took the life of George Floyd to protect and serve. And to know that he could very coldly suck the life out of that man by just using his knee, it, for me, had a very dramatic effect. I literally cried when I saw it. And I know a lot of Black officers have been impacted and no one's really spoken to them. I've actually spoken to a lot of officers because I'm still a Black Police Association member, and I speak to colleagues, and no one's really understood the impact of not only that case, but cases over here. And it's never been talked about. And then obviously the Black Lives Matter ripple effect all over the world, including this country, I believe is raising that consciousness, which again, Black officers cannot really come to terms with, especially with their supervisors. No one wants to have those conversations in real depth. And I must admit, when I went on one of the marches, the BLM marches in June of last year, shortly after George Floyd's death, and I saw Black officers on the march itself and policing, and you could see that sense of they want to show more emotion. I could tell, because I know what it's like, having been on anti-racist marches for many years and policing it, but I couldn't show my emotion. So I could pick up certain signs, but I think the issue around taking a knee to show solidarity against that form of racial inequality that can lead to death, I think it's something that I'm really proud that even the sports, the Premiership have continued with that. And I know that I took a knee during that march, and I know officers or all colours would like to take the knee, but because the commissioner, Cressida Dick, said, no, I would not encourage any officer. I don't want to feel pressurised. But I think sometimes those small acts of solidarity can really build trust and confidence. People need to know that you're feeling the same pain as they are to build those relationships. So I see that the issues of policing needs reforming. I truly believe there is a real important need for police reform. I'm not into defunding the police, as the American term is. I'm very clear on the public health approach, which is not far removed from what the ideas they have around defunding in the US, because you need to direct your assets to make sure that officers are going to calls where they are best suited. I don't think police officers, either in the US or the UK, are equipped to deal with a mental health case. They're not trained to deal with that. And we've seen how, especially Black men who are suffering from mental challenges, have had draconian police tactics. They've been tasered, they've been handcuffed, they've had shackles on their feet, even hoods put on their heads. And we've seen that on both sides. So I don't think police officers should be called to that. There should be a triage approach with a psychologist, approved social work, etc. And similarly with drugs induced psychosis, I don't think police officers should be dealing with drug cases. And again, there should be that bespoke approach. So I see the reforms we've gone through in the UK with the public health model and that approach of directing policing in a more public health attitude and being trauma informed, is actually understand that people are not necessarily prisoners. They should be sometimes seen as patients. And I'm starting to see there is that sort of conversation they're having over in the US. So I think we're in a very critical time. I like to think that, with Joe Biden at the helm, there will be that more collaborative approach and looking at police reform as making them working smarter and not just harder.
Our student president, Libby, if you can unmute yourself and put a question to Dr. Logan, that'd be wonderful.
Yes, hello. My question for you today is, how has the role of women within...
I can hear you.
I didn't quite catch that. Can you say that again? Or did you get it, Leroy?
No, about the role of women, that's all I caught. Libby's on mute again. I don't know if she can repeat her question.
Libby's going to type her question in the comment section, as I believe she's having some trouble with the connection.
Okay, that's good.
Sorry, my internet's really bad, so I'm like trying to type it.
I want to Daniel, just before Daniel comes, Libby, can you type your question?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, yes. Go ahead. I can hear you now.
I'm afraid she's gone again there.
Okay.
But Leroy, one of the things that I was impressed with, and you may want to pick this up, when we went to LA, I think it was 2001, I was very impressed with the way in which the police officers that we met, at least, are so proud of their faith. And as police officers, they almost wore their faith on their sleeves. I mean, we don't do that over here. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's a reflection of the society. They don't tend to be overtly faith orientated in an operational sense. In all honesty, they used to think I was a bit of a religious nut when I said that my faith was my resilience, my anchor. And so it's really refreshing when I went to America and I saw the importance of seeing officers worshipping in a church in uniform. I thought that was great. And I know the
their guns, Leroy.
Association have gone on to do more like that. So, you know, for me, it's a no-brainer. I think, you know, remember, police officers are supposed to be peacemakers, and as a result, by the Beatitudes, we are sons and daughters of God. So we should be godly. We should be looking at our faith being important to give us that clarity around what policing is all about, and not to be absorbed into the operational culture, which can distort that. And I think also it's that pastoral element of policing is very important. And you know, because most of policing is not around blue sirens and blue lights and sirens. It's basically building relationships. And I think for me as a Christian, it's been an extra tool in the toolkit to build relationships, and if need be, speak about my faith in a way that is around how can we all work together. So I work with Muslims, people of Jewish faith and no faith, and Sikhs, etc. And I've seen that my faith has been common ground to have those positive relationships. So that's one of the things I really loved with the US. Nothing much changed over here in that respect, but I know in the US, because I'm still in touch with them, they're going from strength to strength with their faith in an operational setting.
Let me see Libby's question. She's asking about how the role of women have changed in the police service over your period.
Well, I think women in policing is a success story, actually, much more successful than race and equality, because just by the fact that the number of women in the police service across the country is almost 40%, and double what it was when in my time. And also the fact that they're at the highest level. I mean, remember, the current commissioner, the top cop in the land, is a woman, and she has 2 members of her management board who are women, and the Home Secretary, she's a woman, and she wants to see more of that, as well as various other diversity strands. So I must admit, in terms of diversity with the gender agenda, I think it has been a success. A lot of the sexism that used to be there has reduced. I wish it had reduced just as much around the racism, but you don't see disproportionate number of female officers leaving in droves like black officers. You don't see white, and mainly white female are the success. I mean, we are seeing black female officers being subject to discipline. Some of you may have heard recently about Robin Williams. There was various civil actions with Palm Sandhu and various other colleagues. So unfortunately, the plight of black women and those of African, Caribbean and Asian descent is not a good one. But in terms of white women, it is a success. But I just wanted all of the diversity strands to come up to the same sort of level, and especially around race and equality, and making sure that we have a level playing field. Because having been investigated myself and trialed by media, I know how it can have a dramatic impact, not only on as an individual, but your family and your friends who are concerned. So I know that we need to get to grips with this, because we lose quality officers disproportionately and prematurely. And I really think that all of these issues need to be looked at and understand that where the systemic failures are, and to address them internally and externally. So in answer to your question, Libby, I think the white female agenda is really improved. I want to see all of the gender issues to be addressed, including black females and the wider race equality issues. And I suppose, in closing, one of the issues around race is, as I said before, the institutional racism issue that was raised by McPherson and the definition. The first 10 years when the recommendation was rolling out, it was showing phenomenal success because he had independent oversight by the Stephen Lawrence Steering Group. And Jack Straw was the first chair of that group, and he passed on to subsequent Labour Home Secretaries. And they were measuring progress, because what gets measured gets done. After the Tory government took over and those the independent oversight of the steering group was disbanded, that monitoring didn't succeed or continue. And progress, we don't know what the progress is, and the number of officers leaving is just as high, and you don't get that same level of growth in that being a reflective organization as we had before. So unfortunately, it seems like it's 10 steps forward, 10 steps back over the last 20 years. But just to re-emphasize, female agenda issues is one of the successes.
Well, you probably addressed the questions which are going to come, but we've got Sabir, our chaplain, wanted to ask you a question. Then Daniel's got a short question for you. Sabir, please.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Leroy, as well. I've been listening intently and it's been really insightful. You've kind of partly already answered my question, and I think, and I really agree with you in terms of your reflection on how police, you know, can be seen and should be seen as peacemakers in the community. So I really agree with that point as well. So my question was around how you would encourage, I suppose, Black, Asian and minority ethnic people to choose policing as a career choice, and how important do you think that it is for the police service to be representative of the community that it serves as well?
Well, you know, I'm a real champion of, there is no no-go area for activism. We need people of all backgrounds and cultures and experiences to be in any organization, public or private, especially if it's their calling, and they should follow that, and they shouldn't be put off by external forces or internal factors. So there needs to be, for me, a real understanding that the more reflective an organization it is, there is a human, moral, and a business case to show that they're more effective, because they build bridges. I touched on the Damalola Taylor case. I know operationally it can have a massive impact in building communications with witnesses, because if we didn't have a team of Black officers to go to house in that North Peckham estate where Damalola was killed, we wouldn't have been able to get a real understanding what happened. So those officers were able to go into houses which white officers didn't even get a look in. Black officers went in, spoke to the residents, and the residents told us who did what, where, and when. And it eventually led to a conviction. So I know the importance of diversity in action, of that affinity policing, building bridges. And people will identify with people they have a shared and common experience with. So the more reflective an organization is, the more that people will say, I will speak to you, I will trust you, I will tell you what's going on. And that's one of the key importance. And there, you know, there's also an inextricable link that the police service do not actually identify or put the highest priority. And the link is this: if you can treat your diverse personnel right, you're better equipped to serve the needs of a diverse public. And the public are always concerned if you don't treat them right. So if they see officers of the same background as them being treated badly, then they're going to think, well, why would I join? Or why would I speak to them? Or why would I cooperate with them? So that's the real link that has always been an issue, especially since we set up the Black Police Association over 25 years ago in 94. You need to understand that people know that if you're not treating people right internally, and they're the ones you've trained and you've nurtured and you're supposed to be supporting, how are you going to be really good at serving the needs of the Black community? So, and I think people realize that the Met and other police services have an issue of race internally and externally. But that shouldn't stop people from joining. You know, I'm a great believer. You can't steer a ship from the shore. You've got to be on board in the captain's cabin to change the direction of that ship. So I would encourage anyone who really wants to take on that vocation. It is a great one, and it needs to be something that the organization has to nurture and spot that talent and really build that talent, and not allow them to leave prematurely because of the hostile and toxic culture. So that's the thing that my book really talks about, and how it needs to be looked at. And also the Small Axe series recently, where John Boyega played me in one of the episodes called Red, White and Blue. It talks about these issues. And I think it's having a conversation now. We had them before after McPherson. It's died away, but I'd like to think it's building up to know the importance of people of all backgrounds and colors and cultures to come into the organization and strive to achieve the true potential.
Thank you, Leroy. We're almost coming down now, but before we do that, Daniel has a question about faith, and then we've just got a few kind of concluding questions. Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about how your faith played an important role. But one aspect of faith is when things go wrong, we also say sorry. Are there any legal reasons why sometimes it's so difficult for police as an institution to say sorry when things go wrong?
Well, sometimes it has legal implications to acknowledge that you're at fault. There could be a legal implication and financial. And I think there's also a cultural issue with the police service, because it's a very can-do, success-driven organization. And the culture reflects that. And to admit failure is something that could have long-term impact on your promotion or the role that you're carrying out. So that's the occupational culture really showing itself, that you don't admit, because this could come back to bite you, as it were. So, but I'm a great believer that people know we're human. We know we can do mistakes. And when police or any public organization have a real sort of difficulty in acknowledging failure, and in fact, they do quite the opposite when they are being approached and challenged about what do they do and how. Sometimes they close ranks at the expense of truth and justice. That's why my book's called Closing Ranks, because I've seen it even before I joined the police service. Because when I was joining, my father was badly beaten up by police while I was in the application process. And I saw how that worked. And he subsequently sued them for excessive force and unlawful arrest. And I was there in full uniform at the court, as it was shown in the Small Axe film, Red, White and Blue, with John playing me very well. And so I have a real issue about the culture acknowledging fault. And I would like to think that, again, people want openness and transparency. And if you're at fault, don't be reluctant to do so, and don't try and hide things. But unfortunately, the culture is so ingrained that I suppose they can hide behind the closing of the ranks and not acknowledge it, because they want to protect the reputation of the organization. And as I said, it can have impacts on that individual or groups of individuals around their development, their promotion, etc. Sad, but unfortunately, it's one of these things. But I would like to think they'll be getting better around these things.
Thank you, Leroy. Just a couple of final questions. You mentioned the film, and I saw all of the Small Axe. They were fantastic. Of course, John Boyega, and I hope you'll help us to get him to do a conversation with us one day, played you. Who would you have liked? I mean, if you didn't have John, who would you have liked to have played Leroy Logan?
I was thinking Denzel Washington would have been good. To be quite honest, I love Denzel. I mean, I look at his speeches. He's a man of faith, very similar. And yeah, he's. I'm not sure about his Jamaican accents, because a couple of films he did with a Jamaican accent, I was a bit suspect. But no, but the thing is, John did an amazing job. In fact, I've known John actually about 12 years ago, when my son went for an acting part, and John was the other person who got the part in a film that brought him out, called Back of the Block. And then I don't know if you know, but John and his sister was one of the last people to see Damilola Taylor alive before he left the library to go home, unfortunately, to his death. And so they went to school together. So those commonalities came out when I realized they was going to play me, and he actually wanted the role out of the whole 5. So I've got to acknowledge that he did a great job. And for those of you who don't know, he's been nominated for a Golden Globe. The award ceremony is Sunday night, Monday morning. So please offer your prayers, whatever faith or no faith, give me positive vibes, because it'd be great if he could get that. He's done a lot of action movies and, you know, very thoughtful stuff, but it'd be really ironical that he plays me and he gets an award. So I'll be putting that on my CV as well.
Well, the final question, obviously we are living in difficult times. You know, students are struggling. Students won't have the experience that we had as students and all the great things, but, you know, they are very resilient. What kind of advice would you like to give to our students now?
Well, it's very similar to advice that I give to our young people in our Voyage charity. And, you know, really important to speak to people who, you know, you feel confident in. I know the impact of lockdown is devastating for some people. You know, just that human interaction is so important. And I would like to think that the more conversations they have, the better. And please don't suffer in silence or say everything's okay and it's not. It's okay that it's not okay. And I think that's really critical. And I know that the number of exams has been affected and so forth. So it's really tough. And our young people, they're going through their GCSE and A levels and so forth. And, you know, we've had to really give them that pastoral support and the families. And again, students shouldn't feel that they are suffering at home. And we know in schools, and some of our young people in schools, they don't have proper meals. And in fact, my old alma mater, UEL, I'm hearing all sorts of things that students are being isolated and they're going to food banks, etc. And I really think there needs to be a collaboration of academic organizations really putting pressure on the government to recognize the trauma that a lot of our students are suffering from. And there needs to be an acknowledgement of that, especially when, you know, we get certain amount of normality. We need to emphasize on that. You know, I had my vaccine yesterday, and, you know, I want to acknowledge amazing work of all the scientists, having been an ex-scientist myself, you know, and that's a real light at the end of the tunnel. But we got to make sure that a lot of our students don't think that light is a train coming the other end and they're going to get hit suddenly by the trauma they've been suffering. So they need to have that conversation. And I really think outreach is so important. And I would like to think local, regional and central government are really going to come to terms with this. And we got to act. And, you know, I would like to think that the first thing young people need to do is have those conversations. If anyone has any problems, please speak to those people you feel confident in. And if you're in desperate need, don't, you know, they always say pride comes before a fall. Don't be too proud. We're all in this together, and we have to work as a family to move on and to strive and be stronger. And, you know, we don't want any more pandemics, but we need to be understanding that this thing's not going to move or change overnight. We're in for the long haul, so we've got to do it together.
Dr. Leroy Logan, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and a joy having you with us. So can we show our appreciation, please? Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much, David.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming. We will have our next Whitelands Conversation the last week of March on the Wednesday, so we will keep people posted. And for those of you who are on Facebook and other social media, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to you being with us for our March conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to give a name check to Herman Allen, my old buddy. It was good to catch up with you during the week.
He's also one of our former students. He's one of ours as well.
That's good, good.
Yes, yes.
We appreciate the donuts, Herman.
That's okay. Cheers.
Thank you, folks.
All right, take care.
Thank you, Leroy.
Bye now.
Bye.